There's
Yeah.
no way you compete with generative AI in terms of knowledge. It's absurd to even think of that. So now, those of us who've been arguing for an interdisciplinary critical thinking framework, in a way, now we can realize that that really is what is essential now. There's something very interesting about something as simple as paraphrasing. We're asking you to put something in your own words. We're asking you to apply critical thinking. So if all you're doing is copying and pasting from generative AI, that actually is not your thinking, and you may not even understand what you just presented. So now you're back to square one, where you've missed the entire point of why we do paraphrasing. You got to stop calling it the soft skills. In the corporate speak and in other contexts, even the politicians will tell you, this thing, soft skills. It's very derogatory, right? Honestly, like it really means like, it's like soft ice cream. Like this is really not the important stuff. Within the IB framework, they talk about the approaches to learning, and affective skills is part of that. It's part of the approaches to learning. Let's stop calling it soft skills. Let's start referring to it as the enduring human skills that actually are the things that AI will never be able to capture.
Hey there, welcome to the LearnIt Podcast. I'm your host, Dheeraj, and I'm super excited that you're tuning into our podcast today. I love having these conversations. We're so blessed to be around so many cool leaders in education today. And I think that these conversations really put light as to all the awesome work that's going on in this industry. One ask I have for you is if you could just take a moment to hit that subscribe or follow button, it would mean the world to me. It helps us to continue the work that we do it in a meaningful way. But I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the LearnIt Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here, Giles, with me today. I have read a bit about your journey. Tanay introduced us. I've seen you on LinkedIn quite a bit. So I'm really excited that I get to speak with you, spend some time with you. And I know you recently made your move to Bangkok. So the time zones are not easy, but I appreciate you making time for us and sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a real privilege, and I think all this gray hair leads to some level of understanding, and some of those experiences have been, harder than others, but the learning from them has been invaluable. So I'm happy to share.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of young people would look for those pieces of advice. But one of the things that your profile mentioned is being a third culture kid, right, from different places of the world. And a lot of people who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, can you give us a quick run through of what your journey in education has been like? So where you started, where you went to, where you spent most of your time, and where you are today, and what you're looking most forward to. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so the third culture experience was very important because essentially I was raised in international schools. Because my father worked in aviation, because he was moving because of jobs, my brother and I benefited immensely from certain educational contexts. So as a young person, not that I had consciously thought about it, I was being impacted. I was being shaped by some very talented, dedicated educators.
Mm.
And when I became a professional, I had something of a plan. I was graduating in Canada through my university studies. I was very interested in communications. I was very interested to an extent in human sciences. And at the same time, I was kind of doing some stuff in journalism. I was doing a range of things, and I wanted something more solid. So what ended up happening was I got an opportunity to go to Japan the first time, uh, on the Japan Exchange and Teaching program. And that program is primarily for language teachers. But it was, again, eye opening. I'd never been in Japan. I'd never lived in Japan. And then at the same time, it made me realize what I could bring to education, like how well it fit me, even in a context like Japan. So when I returned to Canada after 3 years, it became a logical progression. Also knowing that my mom had worked as a teacher, my dad in aviation, essentially, has had a career where he's a training pilot. He's had a career where he's led teams, he's built airlines, and his level of teaching others has been very high. So in a way, it is in my family. Um, and then I'd met and seen what some very talented educators in Canada had been doing, people who impacted me, in my sort of high school and college years.
Mm.
And so I just learned from those folks where it could take you. To be frank, I didn't. I don't think when I met my wife, I was thinking that we're gonna have this international education life. It sort of arose because when our daughters were young, we had twin daughters. Job opened up in the Bahamas, and I was ready to go. I'd been working in IB Continuum School for 10 years, and I saw where my knowledge base could take me. So there is a kind of synergy to it, but it's not like it was a grand plan.
Yeah.
And it's in a way just a lot of good fortune.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are you up to now? Where you know you where you're at physically, but tell us a little bit about what you're up to right now.
So this role is essentially a secondary principal role. The title of my job is middle and upper loop leader at VERSO International School, and we're located in the Bangkok metro area. We are still a startup. This is only year 6 of our existence. So it's a very interesting contrast because I've worked at very long established schools. My previous school in Japan has been around for 101 years.
Oh,
Um, and then I'm going from that context to one that's very new, but this is exactly what I needed. I think where I think I'm in life, our daughters have graduated now through the international school experience, and they're moving on to their adult pathways and professions. And I think Southeast Asia is a fascinating place. The investment in education, obviously, it's well known how much families value education within these societies.
yeah,
And then when those of us who are working in the international schools are trying to develop this for those families, we start to expand horizons. And one of the things about Verso that's really exciting is its commitment, project-based learning, interdisciplinary learning, experiential learning. Um, the idea that as a learner, they will encounter teachers working in teams. Our learning designers work in teams pretty well, 80 to 90% of the time. And that feeling, that reality is one that redefines the educational experience. So for me, coming in, I'm still fairly new to this role. If you talk to me in a year, I'll have a whole different set of stories. But I'm very excited to help a new model of education happen.
yeah. It sounds really exciting, and it sounds it's one of those things that everybody in education understands the importance of, right? It's sort of we all know that it is the future in terms of how our kids need to learn. And I think a big part of it is what's the right steps you take to bring it to life at your school. And I think it's such a big part of the culture at Versa. It is the identity of Versa to sort of approach education in that manner. So I'm really interested to see how that unfolds with time as well. One of the things I do want to ask you is, you know, you've traveled a lot, and which means that you've gone to schools and cultures where everything was very new to you. Now,
Mhm.
for a teacher that's listening, that's saying maybe they're going on exchange. Maybe I don't know if that's the word they use, but maybe I use that in university. But maybe they're going on an international program, or
Sure.
maybe they're thinking about, do I want to move countries from as an educator? How do you think, or what advice would you give them when it comes to adapting? Because I think that adapting aspect of it looks very different when you move between schools in a country because you're still comfortable in many aspects versus when you're moving internationally to a new school to a new place where you don't even have friends, right? So talk to me in terms of what has worked for you and what would you suggest people as they think about this in their career.
That's a great question. I think that, first of all, being an effective educator, being, especially in this day and age, is all about adapting. It actually doesn't matter what context you're in, that the world is changing very quickly. The experience that you've had growing up is not the same experience of the young people that are immersed in a completely different reality in some ways. So that has to be a central part of what people bring with them. Um, if they take that mindset, then you come to the point of seeking to understand. You come to one of the more fundamental ideas of moving abroad. Um, I am very fortunate, having lived in so many different cultural and national contexts. I've become a very good observer. And because I've become a very good observer, um, this skill set has served me well in terms of unpacking how cultures and societies can function around me, and frankly, my place within a specific,
Mm.
situation. Next to that, you have to give yourself some empathy. You have to be kind to yourself as you open up into a new experience, especially as a professional, especially as one who is supporting families, supporting learners, building capacity, because there can be missteps and there can be cultural, misunderstandings. And as long as you can correct within that and understand how and why to be effective, then you find, and this includes, by the way, making friends with people within the society and learning the language and all those other things that
Yeah.
come with it. Uh, and I genuinely think, from my perspective, what my family has been experiencing in these transitions is not just a typical expat life, you know?
Mm.
And a good example for me, which is another fascinating side to this, one of my daughters, she's starting university now in Canada. And then she informed us she's going to get whatever degree, whatever specialization. She wants to move back to Japan. She wants to work in Japan, because she loved that reality so much. And, she's not Japanese. We're not Japanese, but there is an element of
Mm.
um, connection that I'm proud to say that I can see that for her, she built.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, like, it's how life pans out too, right? Like, I mean, your family, yourself were destined to be in a place where you don't even know, maybe for decades and for thousands of years, maybe your family will continue to be in Japan. And that might be such an interesting thing because my dad moved to Uganda when he was 17. Now I grew up
Mm.
there. I don't know that I would want to live there, but it's not because it's a bad place or it's a poor place, but it's just like I feel like I've lived it enough to say, okay, I think I want to try something different. And it could work. It could work either way, but it's just interesting how everybody's journey is so distinct and so different that those decisions about where you spend your time can have a large effect on not only yourself but your kids and their kids and possibly for generations to come as well. Um,
That's a good point.
yeah, that's interesting. I love that. And so one of the things I'd love to learn from you as well is when you when you go to these different places, talk to us a little bit about what some of the differences are when you think about education. I mean, I know one of the things you mentioned is uh some in culturally in some places there's a lot more of an investment or emotional investment from parents from community in education, more importance placed on it than other countries maybe. Do you see that
Yes.
education quality tends to be different there? Do you see that there tends to be some very distinct differences? What comes to mind when you think of that?
So I think you can slice it in many different ways. I think what you would want to see if you were doing a comparative analysis is what are the things that make very impactful schools and high quality education for young people. And then each of those metrics could be one that you evaluate within that analysis. So, for example, when you have a strong partnership with parents and guardians,
Yeah.
that typically means your school will be more effective. It doesn't matter whether it's a private school or a public school. It really, that's
Mm.
not the relevant factor there. It's the investment in that. So, for example, tomorrow at Verso, we have the parent group coming in, and they're going to have a brunch with us. Our admissions team has worked really hard to set this up. This is our kickoff brunch together with the leadership team. um, this matters,
Yeah.
it's fairly informal, and it's a way of getting to know each other as people. So especially since this is a fairly young school that we're growing, we're trying to grow.
Yeah.
But if we put that in context, wherever you are in the world, that looks different. I'm very fortunate. I would say in Southeast Asia and in East Asia in general, I was working in Japan obviously before, the level of value that's ascribed from the
Yeah.
family side towards education is really high. And in some ways, it kind of maybe explains why, as I knew I was leaving Japan, we were planning to move as a family. I seriously was looking at, I think I would like to stay in Asia because I see the potential of that kind of building a partnership. Other factors that are more kind of quantifiable, um, the actual investment in resources, the investment in technology, um, maybe not like just for the flashiest things,
Yeah.
but actually the kind of technology that could be transformative in a learning situation. That again is an interesting metric because that is one of the things that young people have to contend with. That is one of their avenues of growth in the world that's around them. So, I do think depending where you are in the world, that investment is strong or less strong or less relevant. And then next to that, there's some very interesting research coming out right now about the AI landscape and the impact in education. People are realizing the immense value of critical thinking. They're realizing the immense value of what is some of the most human qualities that we will need. And if that's the case, how are you designing, for example, learning experiences? As I mentioned, when we have two learning designers, two teachers in the room, kind of facilitating dialogue with kids, that builds those skills in a very measured and substantial way.
Yeah, I like the fact that you use two words over there, learning designer and facilitator. So, and I've heard this before that the role of the teacher is shifting, right?
Yeah.
As we get more technology, it's less so about being the person in front of the room and maybe just being an orchestrator, right?
Yeah.
How do you think of that in your current role? I mean, I asked this because I don't know if you saw the recent study that came up with MIT that they did about the impact of AI and specifically ChatGPT on our minds. And they got a
Yeah.
group of people to use it and a group of people not
Yeah.
to use it, and it's it is shocking and like it is concerning
Yeah.
the effect it has on our mind and how much capacity it uses. And that research, the people who are researching, I know that they felt that this was so important for people to know that they did not peer review it because they said we need to get it out like
Yeah.
ASAP so that people are aware. And I think
Yeah.
with kids that with younger kids or with even anyone that's still developing their brain, that impact is more exponential versus someone who's already sort of a little bit more
Yes.
and sort of they're using it as just a supporting tool. How
Mhm.
do you think about shaping our future generation in a way that they can still be critical thinkers? They can still solve problems and they're not just their instinct isn't to say, let me ask ChatGPT, right? That shouldn't be the instinct. There should be a bit of a trying mentally to solve a problem
Yeah.
themselves. So how do you think of that?
So, I mean, we're still in very early days with it all, but the urgency of the moment is clear. I did see the summary of the MIT study and maybe reinforce some of what I was thinking as a longtime educator. You have to make the time to develop the critical thinking. There are various ways. There are ranges of approaches. Um, One of the tricky parts there, and I've talked to many parents around this, is how does one help a young person build the motivation to develop that critical thinking? How do you frame when we talk about teachers as learning designers? That's exactly where we can have the conversation. If a teacher, an educator believes that what they're doing is not just delivering what's in a box or just ticking off the content standards, then that educator will be more likely to design, you know, in ways that are not just answerable through generative AI.
Yeah.
They're more likely to pause some of the best, not only in class learning that I've done with young people, but also workshops, with adults. Some of the best moments have been when we paused, when we reframed, when we allowed reflection of any kind, and then reset what we were doing together. And this requires a spirit of inquiry and it requires facilitation and design. So, to your point, it's a very good point. That's where education is going. To some extent, it's already been there. The educational research has been pointing this way for a long time.
Yeah.
The issue now is it used to be a debate. There used to be this. There's the people who were very obsessed with content. You need this, you need that. It has to stay in your head. You have to relay
Right.
it in an exam. And really, being very blunt, those people have lost the argument. There's
Yeah.
no way you compete with generative AI in terms of knowledge. It's absurd to even think of that. So now, those of us who've been arguing for an interdisciplinary critical thinking framework, in a way, now we can realize that that really is what is essential now,
Yeah.
because we know that the generative models are only getting better. They're getting plugged in. To your question, when does the teacher support and enable it? You know,
Mm.
when does the teacher um, allow for experimentation with AI? I'm actually thinking about one of the interesting things with my job, because we're still a fairly small school, is I actually get to do some teaching, which normally someone in my role, I'm usually doing a lot of leadership work and very little teaching. And it's kind of cool because it's been a long time since I had this
Yeah.
kind of classroom experience. So we have an interdisciplinary class, essentially grade 11 and 12, like combined together. And the class is basically English, language arts with psychology. And because my training is in English language arts, even tomorrow, I've got a little mini lesson that I'm going to facilitate around paraphrasing. It's a fundamental skill. And I'm very curious. I might at a certain point allow them to just dive into AI on this thing.
Yeah.
What does it take to use an AI tool? Because here's the interesting thing about paraphrasing. You could get a lot of similar responses through generative AI to paraphrase one article or one summary of findings or research. Is it a good paraphrase? I don't know, right? Because I think the AI needs your guidance to understand how to do this the right way.
Yeah.
Is it avoiding plagiarism? And more fundamentally, there's something very interesting about something as simple as paraphrasing. We're asking you to put something in your own words. We're asking you to apply critical thinking. So if all you're doing is copying and pasting from generative AI, that actually is not your thinking, and you may not even understand what you just, uh, presented.
Yeah.
So now you're back to square one, where you've missed the entire point of why we do paraphrasing. So I want to bring that up. I mean, I hope that for the learners, it's not going to be too much. But I think if we have time, I don't want to be in a world where I pretend in the classroom that AI is not around them constantly, because it is now. It's gradually becoming the case. And so therefore, what are the toolkit, uh, conceptually the toolkit that we should, develop with them?
I completely agree. To your point, I don't think the approach should be sort of ignoring it by any means. I think when ChatGPT first came out, there was a lot of noise, and we had a large group of educators that chose to ignore and just hope that it would show up. I think
Yeah.
in just maybe a year and a half now, when did it come
Yeah.
out? Wait, yeah, like a very short period of time, that narrative has changed. I don't
Yep.
think I've seen any teacher now that's saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to ignore this," because they realize they can't, right? So
Yeah.
whether they like it or not, it's going to be there, and it's about how do you
Yeah.
adapt, how do you create a space and an ecosystem where I was at a workshop yesterday actually, and we were just having a fun activity, right, just to warm the kids up. We were doing broken telephone. Okay, so like Chinese whisper broken telephone, and so I said, okay, uh, I couldn't think of any phrases. So I went like my instinct was, yeah, I'll just go chat GPT and I got a few phrases. And all the kids were like, oh, so you use it just like that? And I'm like, well, I needed a phrase for you guys, right? Like I'm not going to waste 15 minutes trying to think of something. I'd rather just get something quick. And we did it even through our main activity. We were redesigning a store. We said, let's get some ideas. Let's just see what it throws at us, right? Like it's not like, oh, it's cheating or anything like that. You just want to see what it throws at you. And you don't have to use those ideas. You're just sort of saying, let me receive something and let me add to it and put my own flavor to it and then create something. So, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I always think about, okay, if I had AI when I was doing IB, I don't even know how the IB kids are doing it right now, how they're doing their IAs and their
Well, it's there, and if you read the IB, to their credit, developed a guidance document that is quite extensive
Yeah,
and quite progressive. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, I was very happy to see that they didn't stand on the fence and just say, "Oh, you can't use this at all." But we started diving into. I mean, there's still some confusion, obviously, as it comes forward, but um, for those who know the IB framework, and at the time I was a diploma coordinator, so I was very deep in terms of helping
yeah,
teachers and students and even parents. The understanding is that you have research tasks and non-research tasks. And what is a research-based task, right? And when you do use it, and I'm old enough to remember when, for example, Wikipedia showed up, and I remember educators saying, "Oh yeah, everything's destroyed now. Wikipedia is going to destroy everything," right? And really, you take a step back and you say, It's another avenue, it's another tool." And yeah, the student who just pulls everything from Wikipedia and throws it in there without critical review is not going to produce as good a paper,
yeah,
and potentially could be plagiarizing. So we have tools. The biggest tool, of course, is the teacher being attuned to what actually is happening. And then the second thing is to set the parameters. So even within, so now with theory of knowledge in the IB diploma, you have the exhibition, which is it is the internal assessment for theory of knowledge. So yes, AI can be an artifact, an AI generated text can be a critical artifact within the exhibition. And therefore, the student is citing that, the student is referencing that, the student is, in a sense, playing with that as a tool. Um, and from my standpoint, I worked with some very talented educators, and I already saw
yeah,
the ways that this could be framed. Yeah.
yeah. It's very interesting. Um, Speaking of IB, I mean, I went through IB myself. Mostly because I didn't have a choice. It was the only program offered at the school. I'll do it. Um, do you think it's for every kid? Because I know it's a very popular program, and at least for
Yeah.
me, it sort of like I was like really miserable in in my last 2 years of high school because of how much work I had. But when I went
Yeah.
to first year of university, I was ahead of everyone because I just knew how to manage stuff and I was just mentally
Yeah.
more prepared. But
Yeah.
when you think about having so much experience through the IB system, seeing hundreds, maybe thousands of students go through the program, what's your perspective on it? Is it for every kid, or is there a certain type of characteristic you need to have that makes it a good fit?
Yeah. So, and again, I don't work for the IB. I'm actually not even at an IB school anymore. So I will just speak from experience and my perspective. Um, I was very, very fortunate. So before I came to this role, I worked in three really solid, well performing IB continuum schools. And what I can say fairly confidently is that the primary years program and the middle years program in the IB continuum absolutely can suit everyone. Yeah.
Mm,
The design of those programs, which are also increasingly becoming popular, allows for flexibility, allows for differentiation, allows for the growth of the learner in ways that are productive.
yeah.
And so those programs, without question, I see that. What's interesting about the IB diploma is that it's for grade 11 and 12. It was never designed for everyone. If you look at the history of it, it was designed for a very particular set of students in particular contexts internationally. So even the IB now has done the right thing in recognizing that we need supplements to what's going on here. So they developed the IB career related program, which is a really innovative parallel to the IB diploma. So it can run in grade 11 and 12. One of the schools I worked at in the Bahamas, I was lucky enough to be there when they implemented the career related program. So we had students who were in grade 11 and 12 getting the IB diploma. And then we had students who were on the CP pathway for career related program. And the two programs do have interlinking parts.
Yeah.
And credit to the IB that has been developed. The career related program has been, boy, at least I'm going to say almost 15 years now. It's been in existence. And That growth now leads to what's going to happen next, I think, which is more evolution of the IB, particularly in the grade 11 and 12 years, where there's more flexibility. Yeah, the workload can be very intense. And I used to have lots of conversations with families about, for certain learners, the level of motivation, the level of focus, the level of self management, even the idea of emotional resilience, which I
Yeah.
saw with my own children. It varies from child to child. And so, therefore, if that's the case, even within the IB diploma, think about the course options that they're doing. Think about how the experience is being framed for them, whether that's their best, the best path for them or not.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think one of the things and this is a bit of a deviation as well, but when we think about kids and, you know, to your point, varying levels of motivation, varying levels of investment, it is very complicated, but I'm curious to know from you, what's the balance between the role of the educator and the teacher and the role of the parent and the role of the friends? Like, it's such a complicated matter, but I'm curious to know from you is like, as an educator, what role do you play in making sure that you are putting forward the best that you can so that kid, if they have challenges in motivation, it's not necessarily coming from the classroom, but it's maybe from other factors that you can't control.
So I think as adults, this is a hard thing for us to hear. I think our level of effect may not be as high as we think it is. However, however, we can create the conditions where growth happens. We can help young people make better choices. We can help set the situational environment in such a way that things are more positive for them, which will include, you know what, sometimes their choices with friends, sometimes their choices with increasingly the online worlds that they're a part of. If we have that conversation with them about what does that lead to, maybe that, for example, just to pick on an easy target, online gaming community may not be the healthiest thing for that child for a variety of reasons. And so then as adults, we do help them make some judgments. We do help them think about, you even have kids now who are doing a social media detox, who are, keeping their phones away, who are picking up books, who are engaging in, more activities like that are face to face. Well, there are adults who are facilitating that. I had a fantastic experience at my last school. Again, looking at my educational journey, I was high school vice principal, I was IB diploma coordinator, and then there was a spot where they needed someone to coach the middle school boys basketball teams. And the athletic director knew me. He knew I'd played basketball. He knew that I had this interest. I coached many, many years ago, right? And he just said to me, he said, look, this is not as, big a commitment as being a varsity coach. And I loved it. I loved it. I absolutely loved being back in that context. And one of the things I love about it is, as a coach, like an effective teacher, you can immediately set a context for those kids. You can immediately create conditions for growth.
Yeah.
Um, and in a way that, listen, sometimes they do need to hear your voice very directly. Um, but oftentimes they're in a self-discovery,
Yeah.
and that's fine. Self-discovery is a very powerful way of growing. And the influence of peers, the research is very clear. Whether it's face-to-face peers or online peers, the effect size is, I think, at least 3 times more powerful than parents or teachers for most kids.
Mm,
So their peer group is always going to be far more powerful. But the question is, how do you guide them in choosing that peer group, and how do you support them when conflict arises within their peer group, for example?
yeah. I love that. It's very interesting. One of the things that, so I've got the joy of teaching, of running workshops and all that fun stuff. One of the things I really wish I get to do is also coach. because I feel like it's such a different type of teaching. Um, it's a unique type of teaching where I think one there's a and I could be wrong because I've never done it, but every time I look at it, I'm like, wow, I would love to try that. I would love to coach like a soccer team or football team. Because one, I know a lot about it, and so two, I'll get very excited about it. But I can also see myself like coming home and YouTubing tactics 2 days before we are compared in
Yeah,
school, just so
yeah,
I can go and make sure that I can
yeah.
give this. And I feel like I'll be because I'm very competitive in that way. So, it's one of the things I haven't got to do, but I wish it's because I haven't worked at a school. A lot of the work
Yeah.
that I've done is through entrepreneurship, and so, if I ever get the chance, I think it would be so fun to coach a team because that type of teaching is very different, than
Yes.
a traditional classroom. So I love that you got that experience as well. Uh,
It is different, but it is where education needs to go.
mm,
The learning designer is a coaching model, is a facilitation model. And the really good coaches, I love seeing interviews with the really good coaches. I love reading about how that works. Um, I even, I've done some investigation into how people do professional coaching, and I have tremendous respect for that model, which also, by the way, is being impacted by AI, right, in fascinating ways. Uh, and so if I was, and there is a chance in my next phase from being at Verso and then looking where I want to go next in terms of consulting and even working in teacher education, that would be my contribution, I think, is
yeah.
to help people develop that coaching capacity.
I love that. And I want to just, if you don't mind, I want to just quickly double click into that it's because some teachers have been in their roles for 10, 15, 20 years, right? And they've been exceptional teachers, but that doesn't necessarily translate to being an equally exceptional facilitator or coach from the get go. So for someone who is a teacher right now, who has been on their role for a long time, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, for someone that's been a teacher for a long time, but wants to start becoming that facilitator, becoming that coach, what are some steps they can take today to move in that direction?
Um, Well, I'd say first of all, I'll plug a book. I found it's funny because I found this book, and anybody else who's found this book has had good conversations with me about it. It's called The Coaching Habit. Coaching Habit's a great book. It gets right into in a very succinct way the heart of this. Probably two or three, maybe even four things that happen when teachers start taking this on. The first thing is sort of a complicated concept, but actually in practice, it's not that complicated. We talk about decentering the teacher from the classroom. That can happen physically. That can happen in lesson design. Uh, and some researchers, even like John Hattie in Australia, they will look at how much does the teacher talk within a 35-40 minute block. How much of that talking is teacher talk? If teachers can intentionally decenter themselves and focus instead on the learning and the active contribution of the students, then a coaching model starts to emerge more clearly.
Mm,
Second to that, you got to give them the tools. So if I have a lot of respect for what Project Zero did out of Harvard Graduate School of Education. They give people the toolkits to be those kinds of educators, the thinking routines that you can use um, to really open that up. One of the people who led the way there is Ron Richhart, and I've been lucky that I've had some professional development where we were participating in his sessions around a very learner focused approach. And then the last part, and this might actually be probably one of the hardest parts, you have to be attuned to what is actually happening for the learners at that moment. So it's kind of a listening that's happening. It's kind of an awareness that's happening. When you work with or observe the teachers who are very good at that,
mm,
you will see them change things almost quickly. You will see them reframe. Um, and in my own experience, what I developed was a capacity to understand I would have the same lesson design, but I would have two different groups.
Mm.
And the first class session, I could see how the strength of that group facilitated something that I could accelerate or decelerate as needed. The next group had a different set of needs, same grade level, but different personalities. So therefore, I had to then make some sets of judgments about where do I need to place focus? Do I need to prioritize, for example, um, eliciting student voice? Like helping the learners feel more confident.
Yeah.
So if you do all those things, then as an educator, you move away from a very traditional model and you start experimenting. And I love jazz music. Some people would compare it to something like that, where you're being more collaborative. And then it creates an environment of collaboration.
Mm. It's something I want to learn more about, absolutely, because it's a craft that I want to, at least from a personal perspective, want to continue to move forward in my own journey. I and I've noticed this even yesterday when we were facilitating. We had two different groups of students, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Um, the morning group very quiet, and I'm always been like, if you start talking, I'll give you a lot of space. But if I sense that you're super, super quiet and I keep trying and even if I ask you the most basic thing, like a yes, no question, and you still don't hear an answer, and you're like, maybe I just gotta do more talking and it's fine. And then the second group was answering all the questions. And so you can notice the different level of engagement because they were a lot more invested. And I find it very interesting. But have you ever been faced with, and this is just very selfish, I'm just trying to solve my own problems now, but if you were me in that first workshop, everyone is super quiet, no one's responding to your very easy questions. What
Right.
do you do at that point? Do you just say, okay, I'll just talk more, or how do you approach it? What would you do?
Um, there are multiple strategies. There are multiple strategies. So the one, so there is actually nothing wrong with silence. There are times when we will allow, especially a more introverted group of learners, let's take quiet time. Let's collect your thoughts on a visual organizer or using technology. Now you can visualize what you're going to say. I'm going to give you some time in a group. Sometimes I've seen research that talks about the optimal group size being two or three. And if you're two or three, it still feels like you've got a thinking partner or two, but then you also know that you're going to be contributing in some way. So let's vary that, right? So you have those moments of capture your thinking, pull it together, and then I'm going to give you the opportunity to contribute because we do need dialogue to happen. You do need to check for understanding. It's just that it can happen in different ways. I've seen very skilled facilitators even use kind of art making, right? Like that becomes the basis of the conversation. And sometimes silence is just needed to get there. You get there in this quieter way. Uh, then like possibly one of the golden strategies in all of this is the emotional intelligence that you can develop as you get to know the learner. Now it's harder if you're going in and you're facilitating, like I'm only facilitating 2 days with these folks. Like I don't really get to know them very much. So that's much harder to do. But it is still possible to do because you can back up from the content and you can build the icebreakers and the relational pieces. My co-teacher in the psychology course today, I saw something completely different from the learners because she was teaching them about neurons, she's teaching them about how dendrites function, how everything's functioning in our brains. And then she said, we're going to do this very interesting reaction experiment where your partner drops the ruler, then you have to grab the ruler and sees how quickly your reaction time goes, right? Very simple thing. Then the next, you do it that way. And then the next one you do, your eyes are closed. And then the next one you do, you have to look away and the person has to tap you. So it's gauging, it's really teaching them how reaction time works and how everything is activated. But at the same time, this fairly introverted group of learners was laughing, was engaging, was finding it very silly at times, right? And it struck me because I knew them in a different way from the other activities we had done. But if the facilitator is skilled enough to give what we will call multiple modalities, so there's another model called Universal Design for Learning that talks very much about the multiple modalities. And then you start to see, oh, wow, okay, this is a way for spurring interest and engagement that's different than it would be for another group or another person. Yeah.
I could probably talk to you all day. Holy shit. I should really more. I could
Well,
really
that's
go.
very flattering. That's very
I have
flattering.
a
Yeah.
lot of things that I want to learn, and it's music to my ears. So thank you. I'll move on. I'll move on just so I
Yeah.
could keep track of time.
Yeah.
Um, all right. I Before I move on to the rapid fire round, I do want to give you the opportunity to share with everybody. I know I've done a lot of research on Verso. I mean, there's some really cool stuff going on architecturally speaking. Uh, with IDEO, I believe there's some really cool stuff going on in terms of how programs are implemented and the focus of the learning. I'm going to leave this as the most open-ended question, but if someone is sort of saying, "This is the first time I'm hearing of this, and I have no clue what this is," and you're 6 years in, it's still early, like in the journey, what would you say to them, and what's sort of the vision that exists for Versa in the coming years?
Um, the biggest aspect of this model and this school is about the development of the individual as a creative, what we would say design thinker, as someone who can understand different ways of approaching, frankly, real world problems, while at the same time getting the skill sets in terms of critical reading, mathematics, science, uh, language study, even in the arts, having the toolkit to be a strong artist or designer. So the school itself has something very radical to offer, particularly in Southeast Asia,
Mm.
where systems have been very regimented. And now we're talking about a very individually focused, you could argue almost personalized set of programs that we're developing. We're getting there. It's still very early days, but we have, for example, high performance athletes at our school.
Oh,
And I had brief conversations with a couple parents who were thanking us because they knew that for their kid to train at the level that they were training, but try to attend a more traditional school, which could include even some of the IB schools having very strict number of hours and attendance and so forth,
yeah.
it would have been almost impossible. But because our model is built in such a way that there's flexibility,
Mm,
we can work with that family. We can help that student athlete build their future. And so that's kind of our pitch is that using projects, using interdisciplinary approaches, using design thinking, these are all tools of personal growth. So and we think that puts us in a very different place in the marketplace.
absolutely, no, absolutely. It is a big part of the future. Is there a certain demographic that you see emerging? Like, is it always student athletes that you're like, okay, we keep getting student athletes because maybe this is a real challenge, or maybe neurodiverse learners? Like, is there a specific demographic that you see keep coming to Verso, or do you think it's just it's really widespread?
It's actually far more widespread than I thought it would be. I've only been here really a month and a half,
Yeah.
and I'm already. It's a bit daunting. I'll be honest with you because when you have a range of needs and they start expanding, as a leader and as an educator, you realize, wow, okay, we need to develop around this, we need to develop around that. And it's also exciting because we can try and build systems for that. But you're absolutely right. We have some neurodiverse learners, some who are highly specialized in what they can do, whether it's mathematics or the arts. And at the same time, if they were, I mean, we have one family, and I can say this just because it's general knowledge. Uh, they were relocating from the US and they have a child who has neurodiversity. And it was a tough thing for them because they knew for work related reasons they would be in Southeast Asia. They sought us out, right? Like
Wow.
they said, if we're going to make this move, we have the flexibility to be in different places, but we've decided we're going to have the house in Bangkok and our kids are going to attend your school because we've done our research, right? These are very knowledgeable people and they've realized this is how it can be accommodated for our kid.
Yeah.
And so we have that. Plus, we have a whole range of other pursuits. I was talking to a learner last week, and they were doing individual projects, and he wants to be a music producer. He's like, this is really my thing. I really want to graduate high school and then really dive like essentially straight into the industry. I want to get my credentials. I want to be there, and I want to make music. We can help that person build that portfolio like now. We're very lucky. Our school has amazing facilities. The
Yeah.
investment in the technology is there. And then our job is to connect the dots for those people. So to your point, actually, it's now that we're casting a very wide net, but the core thing is it's about the individual growth and that kind of personalized education.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna make sure. Hopefully, if I get to visit, if I get to be in Bangkok, I'll make sure to come by because
Yeah, yeah.
it sounds like something also that you, if you walk into a school like Verso, you'd see a lot of different learners, and I
Yes,
think that that's a very unique environment to be in as an educator because even you are learning to adapt and to learn about these different students and what they care about. And someone wants to be a professional basketball player while the person sitting next to them wants to be a professional music producer, right?
that's right.
So
That's right.
how do you as an educator also deliver a meaningful experience to both of those very different groups of kids? So that's something hopefully I can get to learn more about because it's very, very interesting to me. Okay, very nice.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to shift gears into a rapid fire round, guys. I'll shoot you a question and I'll love a response in under a minute. So, my first question is, what is one belief about educational leadership that you've changed your mind on recently?
uh, the belief I've changed is that the established approaches uh, are increasingly not useful. So the belief I've changed is actually switching me to a different belief, which is as a someone experienced as a leader, I have to go even further in terms of being flexible. And I already saw myself as a flexible person,
Yeah.
as seeing a broad picture. But we all travel with our own heuristics. We all travel with our own ways of slicing and dicing the world. And I realized um, those templates can be problematic. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Um, what is one thing that you would be most proud to be remembered for?
In terms of my colleagues, someone said to me as I was leaving from Japan, and it's going to stay with me a long time because I respect this person greatly, that they felt that they didn't work for me because I was a leadership member. They thought they were working more with me. They appreciated that we had so much collegial time together that it meant that to them in a really fundamental way. I really appreciated that. In terms of young people, learners, like the hundreds of young people that I've worked with, the biggest thing I would like to carry out is that I've given them some kind of positive impact,
Mm,
and whatever that looks like for them, really, it's they could define that. But for me, that's a legacy item that to me, it's its own kind of wealth.
yeah, I love that. I really like it. No, that's awesome. What is something that most people don't know about you?
It's funny because my family knows this, but I don't really broadcast it to students. So I've actually tried creative writing. I actually have this little notebook of constant writing ideas just churning away
Oh, wow.
almost once a week. It's like, okay, what about this? What about that? So, and I'm very curious what happens to those of us who are storytellers in the age of AI. But, as I move to the next phase, I had a thought that, yeah, I think I need to get back to being a writer in a certain way. I'm also interested in screenwriting, doing some things differently. And yeah, maybe, what is the augmentation of AI? What does that mean when you do that stuff?
Very cool. I love that. And my last one on the rapid fire that I'm going to throw in. What is something a student has taught you?
I think, oh yeah. I think the biggest thing is that I'm adding my own children into this, by the way.
Yeah.
The biggest lessons have been that they are going to figure it out for themselves. So it has been quite illuminating at times when I would either with my wife or with my colleagues or looking at a particular learner, how could they navigate this social emotional issue, this academic issue, this parental issue? And the thing that they're teaching us is that there's a lot more resilience there than we realize. And that if we give them the condition, if we give them the support, the psychological safety, um, it's almost perpetually that they will surprise you. And
Yeah.
so I take that, I can think of many, many examples where, and being very blunt, I'd have a parent or a colleague say to me, that person's not going to graduate. That person won't be able to do this, right? And then I'll be sitting at graduation. I'll see that person, moving on to college, or you see them on LinkedIn and what they're doing next, and you think to yourself, actually, they proved us wrong, and so we have to just be very, very cognizant that there is a whole range of resilience there that we can learn about from young people.
Yeah, that's such a good message. I mean, as a kid, I was always the one that caused the chaos at school. And I remember, I'll get in trouble and I used to be a bit annoying to the teachers and all that stuff. And I was never like academically at the top. And when it came time for I think it was my IGCSE exams when I was moving from grade 6 to 7, the middle school exam, I did not do that well. And one of the teachers was like, "Yeah, I don't think you should do IB. Like, it's just you're gonna struggle a lot." Um, and my mom was like, "No, no, you'll be okay. Like, it's okay. Let him just do it." Because I didn't want to leave my friends. That was the biggest thing. I was like, "I don't care about IB. What is IB, right? I want to be with my friends." Um, but then I ended up, uh, and I remember at that time, I remember this very well. But it was more about the fact that I had disappointed my mom,
Yeah,
that my teachers felt I couldn't do something.
yeah.
And so I don't know, as a kid, I was like, "Yeah, screw you," So I ended up working really hard, and I was the second highest in the whole school when I graduated IB. But I realized that, I mean, one, I'm grateful that teacher said that because maybe I wouldn't have performed that well hadn't she put a bit of fire under my ass. But I do feel that it's interesting to your point to say we have to, as educators, be mindful about the impact that we have kids on what we say and or
Yeah.
the assumptions that we might
It's
make
the
about someone's ability because of an interaction or an experience we have with them.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you, it's shocking, what children will internalize,
Yeah,
and adults may not be conscious that they're projecting that. It can have huge effect.
yeah, that's really good message. I honestly could talk to you all day on this, but I want to be respectful of your time too. So, I'm gonna shift gears into a final question. So we have a bit of a
Sure.
tradition here. We have our previous guests leave questions for upcoming guests. So I'll ask you a question from one of our previous guests, and then I'll also give you an opportunity to leave a question for one of our upcoming guests. So just
Sure.
gonna grab my handy little notebook where I keep all the questions from,
Yeah.
and we get them written down as we can. I know we're virtual, so I'll ask you at the end to say out your question if that's okay.
Sure. No
Uh,
worries. Yeah, man.
but my question to you is, let's see, I'll try ask you a question from someone you may know. So I'll ask you a question from actually Leanne Foster, the principal at
Yeah.
UT, because I loved her question. And her
Yeah.
question is, what is one thing you need to stop doing in order to be a better leader?
Fantastic. I worked with her at Branksome Hall. I have a lot of respect for Leanne. Um, I have a habits tendency where I will move quickly in response, often to help people find solutions, and usually because I'm sometimes stressed and I just want to move into it. So if it could be less of reaction, then probably my decision making will be better. And if it's more responsive and mindful, I know my decision making will be even better. So the I've worked on it. I think I need to work on it more. Like that reactive component is very tempting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not an easy thing, especially when I feel like you're a bit of an innovator or you have the tendency, you're a problem solver as well, right?
Yes.
So there might be this sort of instinct to jump. I think
Yes.
so. That's you have a good degree, a very high degree of self awareness, which is really helpful and important. Um, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to leave a question for one of our upcoming guests. So feel free to say it out loud. Whatever question comes to heart that you'd like to leave for a future guest on the show.
Sure. Something near and dear to my heart, especially with the research that I'm learning about. Um, if you're an educator, especially in the classroom setting, how are you developing emotional intelligence with the learners? And if you're a leader, how are you developing emotional intelligence within your teams?
Mm.
Yeah.
Not an easy question to answer by any means. And if you do have a bit of time, I don't want to keep you here as well. But
No, I got some time. Right? I'm not in a mad rush
if
now.
you could give me, because I know you care about this deeply, and I think that's important. Give me the 3 points that every educator needs to think about when it also comes to emotional intelligence, based on the research you've done and your experience as well. What are some of
Hmm.
those really important things when it comes to shaping our future generation?
The first thing, Daraj, is a very interesting thing. You got to stop calling it the soft skills. In the corporate speak and in other contexts, even the politicians will tell you, yeah, yeah, this thing, soft skills. Uh, it's very derogatory, right? Honestly, like it really means like it's like soft ice cream. Like this is really not, the important stuff. So, Simon Sinek, he refers to it as the human skills. Within the IB framework, they talk about the approaches to learning, and affective skills is part of that. It's part of the approaches to learning. So let's stop calling it soft skills. Let's start referring to it as the enduring human skills that actually are the things that AI will never be able to capture. That's
Yeah,
the things that make us different. That's the first thing. That's kind of conceptual, right?
yeah,
Then you get into if we're talking about it, and again, I'm I'm far from an expert, but this is my learned experience. Then you get into a commitment to growth mindset.
mm,
It is really interesting to talk to educators and kids and parents and have them understand that, you know what, you can learn to be more caring, you can learn to be more resilient, and then you can learn to be more emotionally aware. And it doesn't require like endless hours of meditation or something. That
yeah,
can help. But what it does require is what we see in all skill development, a sustained commitment to this domain, which actually, in the long run, all this longitudinal research is telling us is so, so important. It gives us the best possible life to have higher emotional intelligence. So, growth mindset says that you can develop it, right?
yeah,
And then probably the last part is just, I would say, like thinking about educators, is that take it in pieces. Take it in pieces. This is what great coaches do. They chunk things down. They'll take a skill and they'll break it down, to its most rudimentary parts, and then they're allowing the learner, the player, whomever, to really work that so that it fits within a larger function. If you do that, you get to another concept that comes from psychology, which is self-efficacy, and the learner feels more confident and more powerful, as they grow. So, I think the research on this is growing because people are realizing how important it is. And unfortunately, when young people are in the online worlds, they're um, impeding their emotional intelligence often. So
Yeah.
you have to somehow counteract that. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, to your point, I love that you're also mentioning that it's something that we can develop. Because what I have seen is we make the assumption that it's something that's given to us. Oh, Dheeraj has really high EQ. Oh,
Yeah.
Dheeraj is not resilient. Oh, Dheeraj doesn't think critically. It's the assumption that that's how we're born, and then we have to sort of play with our skills. Versus the mindset that we can actually learn these, just like we learn academic things, right? So I
Yep.
like that you're changing or you're sharing that narrative because I think it's important for educators but also parents to understand that that is not something your child is like not just given. It's something they can work on and they can improve if
That's
if
great.
they wanted to. And yeah,
That's
absolutely,
great.
I also stopped calling it soft skills. Yeah, even in our website and our marketing, our messaging, our branding, I'm saying nothing about this is soft. In fact, this is more harder than anything else. So we copy Simon as well, and we use human skills.
Yeah,
That's the phrase I prefer. But I agree. It's those small shifts in the way that the care and sort of how we position things and how important they are that also sort of mentally puts a student to say, okay, this is really important or this isn't as important. I love that. All right. Well, I know we've been talking for a while, but this has been an absolute joy to do. I mean, thank you so much for joining me.
that was
I
my pleasure.
personally had like a lovely conversation with you. I've got to learn so much, which is the best part of this job is I get to consume this vast amount of information and learn from incredible people like yourself. So I appreciate you giving me the space and the time and your mind for the last hour or so, and it's been an incredible episode.
Yeah, great, great. Okay, so yeah, please stay in touch.